Some gardens were afterwards laid out on the mainland, as well as on the island. Here many kinds of seeds were planted, which flourished very well on the mainland, but not on the island, since there was only sand here. And the whole were burned up when the sun shone, although special pains were taken to water them. Mainers are passionate about their gardens, and you may be interested to know that I just read to you one of the first, if not the first, written account of a garden in North America. The failed island garden was planted in 1604 on St. Croix Island, located near the mouth of the St. Croix River in Robbinston, Maine. It was planted by none other than the crew of Sieur de Monts during his famous voyage, chronicled by cartographer Samuel de Champlain. In Maine, there was once a connection between gardens and the 4th of July. And preparing for the 4th started all the way back in April. I will let famous Maine cook Marjorie Standish explain.
It is a Maine tradition on the 4th of July to serve fresh salmon, fresh green peas, and new potatoes for your family dinner. The custom persists, and I have questions like, my mother cooked her piece of fresh salmon in cheesecloth, and it was steamed. How do I do this so I may carry on the tradition in my own family? Of course you want to do this. Chances are there was a vegetable garden in your own backyard, where your father took great pride in raising peas for the 4th. Mine did. Green peas are still ready for the 4th in Maine. It means planting them by Patriots' Day, April 19th. It is a kind of silent contest in Maine among gardeners. Any man is happy to announce, we're having peas from our garden for the 4th.
That was from her book, Keep Cooking the Maine Way, published in 1973. Mrs. Standish lived in Gardner and Augusta, Maine, but here is another account of the same tradition that comes from Pembroke, Maine. Doris Bridges, who was born in 1900, writes this about her grandfather, who operated a farm in the 1870s.
Perkins worked hard on his place, and he was a good farmer. He hauled loads of manure, seaweed, and fish heads and improved his land. He dug out rocks and roots from 4 acres of pasture to make another fenced-in field. In the fall he plowed, and then on his sunny, well-drained slopes he put in potatoes and peas the last of April, before most of the other farmers around thought they could get a horse on the ground. In that way he always had green peas and new potatoes on the market in Eastport before the 4th of July, and commanded the best prices of the year.
One last account of a Maine 4th of July meal comes from Laura Beam of Marshfield. She is describing the 4th in the late 1800s.
The dinner traditional to the day was new peas and new potatoes, the first of the year from the garden, with wild strawberries smothered in yellow cream and hot biscuits to follow. Meat would be too much to expect unless a chicken were ready for the pot, but everyone who felt the need of something more substantial could always have stripped fish. Once in a while, the Ladies' Aid Society served a chicken dinner on the 4th. Plates of ice cream sold at 5 cents all the afternoon.
Standish's account is different from Bridges and Beam's because it also mentions that salmon was a part of this traditional meal, at least in some Maine households. The sea-run Atlantic salmon has an interesting and sad history in the state of Maine. It was once very abundant in Maine rivers, but is now an endangered species. One of the last places in Maine that sees this fish in small numbers is the Denny's River in Dennysville. The Atlantic salmon is an anadromous fish, living most of its life in the ocean and migrating up rivers to spawn. Although the largest recorded fish are about 50 pounds, historically they average 10 or 12 pounds. As for their average size today, I don't know. When in the ocean, these salmon have a silvery appearance with a brownish back and black spots, but when they migrate upriver to spawn, they change color. They swim upriver starting in the spring, hiding in deep pools, but spawning occurs in October and November. In 1893, Benjamin Lincoln of Dennisville reported the original condition of the salmon in the Dennis River. As stated before, they were once abundant, and the salmon in the Dennis were smaller and more mackerel-shaped. But in 1845, a dam was constructed on the river, which blocked the entrance to their spawning grounds, which reduced their numbers greatly. After the dam burned in 1858, their numbers increased to some extent. From 1874 to 1890, Benjamin Lincoln tried to further restore their numbers by planting Penobscot salmon eggs, which eventually replaced the unique, smaller, mackerel-shaped salmon for good. Robert T. Morris reports in 1909. Until very recently, the river was full of salmon. There are half a dozen fine pools within the first 2 miles, and the salmon took to the fly freely. They tell of Mr. Prime and Mr. Brackett taking 8 or 10 salmon a day. Shad come up the river in June in large schools, and furnished an abundance of toothsome fare for the people. Alewives crowded the ripples, and the poorer people laid up barrels of them against a snowy day. But these things are all spoken of in the past tense, because the lumber company has a sawmill at the head of the tidewater, and the artificial fishway will not allow breeding fish to pass. The dam and the sawmill today are gone, but the sea-run Atlantic salmon has still not returned to their original numbers. Remember, these are endangered in Maine, and it's against the law to catch these fish. If you'd like some recipes for a Maine 4th of July meal, check the description below. There you'll also find the sources we use for this video. And now that you have all you need to enjoy your peas for the 4th, we'll leave you with this poem by Henry David Thoreau. Salmon Brook, Pennachook, ye sweet waters of my brain, when shall I look or cast the hook in your waves again? Silver eels, wooden creels, these the baits that still allure, and dragonfly that floated by, may they still endure?